I grew up in the backseat of my dad's white Chevy Blazer, windows cracked, right? Blasting Creed, Stained, Seether, Shinedown, you name it, dude. Basically, the national anthem of custody battles, essentially. And honestly, that music might have been corny to some, but it meant something, right? It was sad, it was dramatic, but it was trying. Okay, there was a message tied to it. Those songs sounded like men in bootcut jeans fighting it out in a Chili's parking lot. And that's exactly why it hit. They were about heartbreak, about pain. They were about something, right? And you compare that to now where half the Billboard 100 is just nursery rhymes, with 808s and degeneracy, drugs, TikTok dances, songs that don't even sound finished, just loops made for attention spans of that of a goldfish, you know what I mean? And you compare that to today where people will still clown on Nickelback, right? Like they're the punchline of every joke, aren't we past this? But let's be real, at least Nickelback was making songs, making real music. You might laugh every time you hear Photograph come on, but it's stuck in your head, and you can't say that it didn't. They gave you verses, hooks, bridges, an actual structure to the music, to the sound. But today, half the time, I don't even know if I'm listening to music or if somebody accidentally hit play on a fucking microwave somewhere. That's kind of what it sounds like. Rock radio now is just on hospice, right? Remember when Guitar Hero was dropping bangers and had all the bangers on them, right? That was the last time rock actually felt alive, you know? And now every station just rotates Imagine Dragons like they're doing penance for a crime, dude. The DJ doesn't even sound excited anymore. It's like just monotone, Up next, we've got Imagine Dragons again. Please don't change the station. My kids need health insurance. You know what I mean? And it's just back then music had bridges, they had solos, fucking a little artistry to it. Even if it was corny, you could tell that somebody cared. There was effort there, they took pride in their craft. But now it's just 2 minute tracks, no bridges, zero effort. Whole albums today sound like background music for a vape shop. You don't even remember the song when you walk out. You just remember the faint smell of watermelon flavored nicotine. Like it's pretty much what it is today, And then going to rap, back when rap was real rap, I came up on old Wayne, 50 Cent, Kanye before he became Ye and started dressing like a medieval squire. You know what I mean? I don't know what's up with that. But these guys made songs that made you feel invincible. Remember? Wayne could hop on any beat and turn complete nonsense into scripture, right? He'd compare himself to a Martian or a goblin, a cockroach, like whatever came to mind. And you'd sit there like, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. This dude's a fucking genius. You know what I mean? And 50 Cent, dude, that man had every kid in America convinced they were bulletproof. He got shot 9 times and turned it into an album rollout. Okay, you'd be walking into middle school ready to start beef with the lunch lady, right? Because 50 said we were all gangsters now. Come on, man. And Kanye, dude, early Kanye wasn't even Kanye yet. It was Kanye West, college dropout, late registration, graduation, soul samples, ambition, artistry, real artistry. And these songs actually meant something. Even if he was arrogant, even if he was cocky, at least that arrogance was built on genuine talent, so he kind of could be that arrogant. But now, dude, rap has just been reduced to TikTok jingles, whole careers are built on one loop that goes viral because somebody twerked to it. It's ridiculous. And lyrics now are just nursery rhymes sprinkled over 808s. She make it clap, clap, clap. Like, bruv, that's not music, big man. That's a Dr. Seuss book with a beat. That's it. And don't even get me started on the whole SoundCloud rap era. That was the peak of anyone with a cracked version of FL Studio can become famous, generation. That's what that was. Face tats, ironically enough. Rainbow hair, 15 different ad libs for the word yeah. What was even going on back then, and they all sounded like they were recorded on a Nintendo DS microphone. These were just absolute cornballs of rap, and I stand on that. That's a hill I'm willing to die on. And it wasn't art, dude. It was Hot Topic with a beat, is what it felt like. But somehow for a few years that became the blueprint. Back then rappers wrote verses. Today it's just ad libs, right? Like the whole studio session is just screaming, yeah, 100 different ways, and then slapping it together, drowning it out in auto tune, and then calling it a day, you know? And whatever happened to genuine rap beef, right? Nas and Jay had Ether and Takeover, right? Legendary beef. 50 and Ja Rule literally destroyed each other's careers. You know what I mean? But now rap beef is just a subtweet and a passive aggressive live, Instagram live or something. It's less battle rap and it's more just group chat drama, you know? And the decline is obvious. Where Wayne would have 77 bars on a mixtape about metaphors, today's rappers have 77 TikToks about their fucking outfit. I'm getting real sick of this. 50 Cent made songs about survival, and now it's songs about sliding into DMs. And come on, man. Rap went from telling the story of the streets to being background music for TikTok dances filmed in suburban kitchens. It's ridiculous. Or pop, right? Pop used to actually pop, late 90s, early 2000s, Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake with the ramen noodle hair, Christina Aguilera, right? Even boy bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, like, yeah, dude, it was corny. Of course it was. It was industry manufactured. But those songs were still songs. You heard them one time and it got stuck in your head until the end of the school year, right? TLR was on MTV every afternoon. People were calling and voting for music videos. Do you know how insane that was, that people were spending money and time to vote for music videos? Ask any youth today about this. They'll have no idea what you're talking about. But now nobody even watches the video unless it's chopped up into a million TikTok dance challenges. Back then pop stars actually felt like they were stars. They were everywhere, on magazine covers, billboards, Pepsi commercials, world tours, and you could love them or you could hate them. That didn't really matter, but you knew who they were. Britney Spears had a meltdown in front of paparazzi and it was international news. Everybody knew about it. But you compare that to now, and all of these stars are having meltdowns every other week on Instagram Live, and nobody even notices, myself included. We're all too busy scrolling or focused on other shit. Nobody cares. They're crying out desperately for attention and they still can't get it. Today's pop is just basically autoplay slop, right? Songs engineered to sound like background noise so you don't skip them, just kind of fill in the silence. But every artist just sounds interchangeable. Every track sounds like it was cooked up in the same fucking IKEA showroom. You play one and you can't remember the name of the artist 5 minutes later. And the industry plant thing is real. This is a real thing. These new pop stars seemingly come out of nowhere with like 3 million followers, blue check. They're already in Rolling Stone. I'm like, who the fuck even is this? Where did they come from? Did I accidentally miss a season of American Idol or something? What am I missing here? It just feels like half of them were generated in Silicon Valley in between coding sessions. There's just copy paste, all the same thing. And let's be real, right? The songs don't even have hooks anymore, strangely enough. Old pop had choruses, like Sean Paul, and you'd be screaming them in your car, even if you hated them. These were choruses that had America in a chokehold. You could not escape these, right? But now it's just some girl whispering about anxiety over a bedroom beat, or some guy mumbling, with autotune so heavy it sounds like Siri's fucking dying. It's just, even the production feels lazy. In the 2000s, Timbaland and Pharrell, dude, they were making beats that defined the sound of a whole generation. And now every beat sounds like it was pulled from a fucking YouTube tutorial called How to Make a Hit in 5 minutes. It's ridiculous. Pop music then used to be unforgettable, right? Whether you wanted it to be or not. And now it's just disposable. Slap it on a playlist, forget it ever existed, move on. That's essentially what we're doing at this point. And it's not even music anymore. It's just become content. It's TikTok backing tracks, essentially. It's Spotify filler. It's all it is, you know? And yeah, I have the same issue with country music, right? Because country music used to cut deep, man. Like some of my personal favorites, like Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline. Dude, Johnny Cash could sing two notes and you'd feel like your entire soul just got audited, right? I Hurt Myself Today, dude, instant classic. That wasn't just a song, that was a man staring into the abyss and mailing you a postcard from the edge. Okay, it was real. And Patsy Cline with the I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. Dude, that woman could sing heartbreak in a way that made you feel like you just got dumped in 1962. You know, just it was real country storytelling, songs that carried a lifetime of pain, love, sin, forgiveness, you know, sometimes all of that in the same verse, in the same song. You could learn more about the human condition in a single Johnny Cash track than you could in half the self-help section at Barnes and Noble, you know. But now, dude, this modern country, it's just been reduced to three words. Okay, beer, boots, and blondes. That's it. You know, every song is a Mad Lib. Got my truck, got my girl, cold beer on a Friday night. You know, that's not songwriting. That's just reading the Walmart parking lot back to me. That's all it is. And the thing is, they just recycle it. You know, you could swap artists' names on half of these and nobody would even notice, right? Jason Aldean, Luke Bryan, the other guy, Morgan Wallen. You know, they're all basically NPCs in the same pickup truck simulator game, you know? Put them in a lineup and it's just different shades of denim. That's all it is. That's the only difference. Old country was actually about pain and survival. Now it's about fishing trips and Bud Light commercials. That's all it is. You know, Johnny Cash, he sang about shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die. Okay. Luke Bryan sings about sipping a beer while a girl with cut off shorts hops in a F-150. You know, now you tell me which one sounds like it's going to stick with you. It's going to resonate, you know? Even the instruments today have gone soft, you know, steel guitar, banjo, fiddle from back in the day, dude, all of that gave country music its texture, its vibe, you know. Now it's just stadium rock riffs with a twang filter slapped on top, you know. They basically turned country music into diet rock music for people who shop exclusively at Bass Pro Shops, you know. And the worst part is, at the end of the day, it works. These songs, they chart, these artists sell out arenas, which means Nashville has no incentive to change. You know, why write the next I Walk the Line when you can just crank out another song about how much you love beer and fucking Wrangler jeans? You know it's going to sell. You know the people are going to play it. You know, country music went from Johnny Cash singing about his sins into a microphone to Morgan Wallen sounding like a drunk karaoke guy that just discovered auto-tune. Okay, Patsy Cline singing about heartbreak that could move you to tears for real, to Florida Georgia Line rhyming beer with here like they're just discovering language for the first time. You know, old country had soul. New country has sponsorship deals. And honestly, I'd rather listen to Johnny Cash singing about shooting a man in Reno again than hear one more fucking chorus about a tailgate party. You know, I'm sick of that. So at the end of the day, when I look back, it's obvious. Music really did die with the divorced dad genre. At least Creed, Stained, Seether, Three Doors Down, you know, they were crying into the mic, okay? They were actually trying to heal something, you know? And it might have been corny, but it was human. It was still real, you know? And now every genre just feels like it's on autopilot. Rock is background noise for vape shops. Rap got replaced and is now used for TikTok jingles and SoundCloud cornballs, you know. Pop turned into industry plant shit for random influencers, you know. And country went from Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline, real artists, bleeding out their hearts to stadium anthems about beer, boots, and fucking blondes, Music used to make you feel alive, almost like listening to a track was a genuine experience in and of itself. And now it just makes you want to skip the track and then the one after that and the one after that. So anyway, dude, if you're as bored with music as I am, hit that subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Drop a like if you've ever been held hostage in the back of a Chevy Blazer, with a divorced dad. Just, let me know. And let me know in the comments what's your divorced dad genre, right? Because I know I'm not alone in this. But anyway, I appreciate you all for watching. As always, it's your boy, Wicks the Board. You stay bored, my friends.